Rabbit, rabbit.
Rabbit, rabbit. Hi, everyone. I'm Amit Parikh, and with me is Dave Orlandi. Dave and I are senior consultants with Quest Software, and we offer up this podcast delivered the first of every month, hence the name, and discuss topics relevant to the IT industry with an emphasis around database performance.
Hello, Amit, and a big hello to all of our listeners. I'm excited that we have a special guest for this podcast, episode number 7. But first, in an effort to build some palpable anticipation, how about I offer a quick, shameless plug? Everyone, if you enjoy this podcast series, please feel free to like and subscribe.
Indeed, the support from our listeners is what will help us grow and create even more interesting content. But without further ado, please welcome Albert Rodriguez, who's an esteemed colleague of ours and on our sales engineering team. As a senior consultant, Albert has been advising customers in the arena of database development and management best practices, specifically using solutions such as Toad and Apex SQL. Albert, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hey, thank you guys. Glad to be here. I know you normally say rabbit, rabbit. For today, I would like to change that to ribbit, ribbit.
I like it, Albert. Amit and I have a lot of admiration for the work you do. I think it's important to share with everyone that before Albert's engineering days with Toad, he was deep in the trenches as a DBA. Albert, I imagine working day-to-day with Toad users around data challenges must be pretty exciting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, never a dull moment in the world of data. Lots of challenges, and it's always evolving. As a previous director of mine would say, the DBA holds the keys to the treasure chest, meaning the data. So with that came a lot of responsibility. It is very important to keep in mind both security and performance of the data when providing access to it.
Albert, I imagine that every day involves data for you, working with evaluators and customers around the Toad family of solutions. For those of you that aren't familiar, Toad is a Quest solution to develop, manage, and administer databases. It is used by DBAs, developers, and data analysts alike across the world. There's no doubt that one of the most important tasks at hand is providing the accessibility and usability of the data, sometimes referred to as, and it's a mouthful, the democratization of the data.
Yes, that's exactly right. Data is constantly being used to help drive smarter decisions. Bernard Marr, the author of the bestseller Big Data in Practice, puts it perfectly when he said, data democratization means that everybody has access to the data. There are no gatekeepers that create a bottleneck at the gateway to that data. To have anybody use data at any time to make decisions with no barriers to access or understanding. And that's precisely what Toad helps users do.
Albert, that's interesting because you mentioned democratization and the use of Toad. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about why democratization needs to happen in the first place.
Sure. Well, COVID is a great example of this. Think about all the data collected that needed to be shared, all of the places it was coming from, the effects people were having from it, the translations, the computation. It was vital to share accurate trends to combat a quickly developing situation.
Most definitely. And there are a lot more data points being analyzed, certainly in healthcare. The access to data has come under greater scrutiny with the massive shift to working from home. And digital transformation overall has redefined the operations of organizations. User experiences are much more differentiated. So this leads me to the next consideration, Albert. I imagine there are some inherent concerns around the free-flowing share of data.
Yes, tons to keep in mind, Amit. I agree. Data is literally everywhere. We've pointed out the monumental task of gathering and providing efficient access. Now that data needs harvesting, right? And making it usable. Albert, I imagine that's not trivial either.
No, it's not. As a matter of fact, that's where it seems organizations have the most difficult time with. Forbes recently cited some numbers on this too. They mentioned that the bottleneck is 60% of the time being spent gathering and preparing the data, while only 40% of the time is spent analyzing. At a minimum, it should at least be the other way around, right?
I agree. And just as John Pocknell, one of our Quest colleagues, alluded to in a recent LinkedIn post, he said it's critical to reduce the time to value of your data.
And not to be overlooked, you two mentioned a popular simile in an earlier podcast. Data is the new oil, and the data needs to be refined to have value. There is a balance, speed and efficiency without sacrificing the ultimate quality of the data to be transformed. This is why I see a good bit of my time being spent showing users the power of Toad Data Point, or TDP for short. It helps with pulling the data from disparate sources, then transforming it. We'd be naive to think that we can only rely on skill sets. We are only as good as the tools we have chosen to leverage. And therein lies why I'm gainfully employed with Quest.
Well, how about that? The Toad agrees with you.
Once again, so as not to come across as an inside joke, Toad has that great soundbite upon launching the solution, what you just heard. One that is recognizable to thousands of Toad users, not unlike the Intel tone or AOL's You've Got Mail.
Yep, that sweet sound of data interrogation. Toad Data Point. Perhaps I'm being a bit biased, but hearing the sound of Toad conjures up the feeling of getting hands dirty in the data, the empowerment of access to the data.
I have to agree. This is one of the most prolific tools there is. TDP allows users to connect to over 30 different types of data sources natively. Now, I say data sources, not only can Toad Data Point connect to traditional databases like Oracle, SQL Server, and DB2, but also BI sources like Google Analytics and Salesforce. NoSQL sources like Cassandra, Hive, MongoDB. And let's not forget your flat files like CSV or Excel. The tool allows you to easily query within these connections and across them. You heard that right. You can query across 2 or more data sources. So for example, you can easily query from an Oracle table that is tied to an Excel file without having to merge the two together. Toad Data Point does that for you. You can also profile your data, transform and cleanse your data, create reports, and automates them for you too. This way, you now spend all of that time analyzing instead of prepping the data.
And there you have it. All the DBA has to do now is provide access to democratize the data. This has been an interesting conversation and one that we hope sparks a lot more curiosity and dialogue around the democratization of data.
Hey, real quick, I would like to acknowledge a peer of mine, Matt Phan, and thank him for offering some great resources on this particular subject.
Yes, Matt provided a great presentation on this very topic, and you can find it in our reference section called Into the Rabbit Hole.
Albert, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thanks, Albert. And everyone, we appreciate you joining, and we look forward to the next one. Please remember to like and subscribe.